Hi, welcome to my podcast. In this podcast, I will be discussing and analyzing the post racial era and how racism has adapted to this era, showing itself in different ways. To analyze this topic, I'm going to be focusing through the lens of Jordan Peele's film Get Out and how the horror in this film is used to explore these topics. But first, let me provide some context. Obama's presidency brought along an era as we know as the post-racial era. During this post-racial era, trends of racist beliefs and prejudices were taught as beliefs that were evil and harmful to individuals, and people should accept others for who they are. People who were openly racist during this era were criticized and left behind by the rest of society. Now, before this post-racial era, racial prejudices were actually more normalized and accepted. It was thought to be normal to be racist against black people, and no one would receive any backlash for these beliefs. It wasn't until during and after the period of Obama's presidency that these racial prejudices began to be recognized as immoral and were not as accepted as compared to the past. Although problems of racial prejudice have been diluted during this post-racial era, there still exists a large group that owns racist beliefs and values. The only difference now is that the group that holds these racist beliefs and values do not prefer to openly express these beliefs with the rest of the world due to how it is now seen as unaccepted to be racist in this society. In Jordan Peele's film Get Out, Jordan uses the genre of horror to explore these contents and themes of how racism is still very much alive and how it's learned to hide itself during the post-racial era. This use of horror doesn't only serve to scare us, but it also serves as a function to educate us. To explore these themes of racism and dehumanization, Jordan Peele implements the creation of the sunken place, which is a dimension that the Armitage family uses to send its black victims so that they can be without control of their own body so that the invading white individual can take over that body. Another implementation that I wanted to mention was how Jordan Peele implements the creation of the coagula procedure, which is a procedure that the Armitage family specializes in, where the brain of a white individual is transplanted into the body of a black person in order to achieve what they want physically. Not only are things created to utilize conventions of horror, but horror is shown in this movie of how tensions are created and how these tensions mix with eerie environments and moods to mirror present situations dealing with racism. This use of cognitive estrangement, horror conventions, and eerie sounds, mood, tone, pacing in Jordan Peele's film Get Out exposes how racism hides itself in today's world. Before we get into the actual discussion and analysis of the film, I would like to first lay out a foundation of exactly what these conventions of horror are and what function they serve to create an impressionable effect on the audience of this film. This film is unique in its usage of horror conventions as it does not specialize in the cliche horror conventions such as jump scares, but utilizes horror in more of a subtle manner that allows the audience to interpret it themselves and form opinions based on how they felt about the film. The first horror convention that I wanted to mention that's very important in this film is the convention of psychological horror. This convention uses horror to build suspense, tension, and feelings of uneasiness from times that would not seem strange in context, but in the moment from a first-hand perspective, give off a mood that does not feel normal or safe. Psychological horror is built not on what you see, but what you hear and feel. For example, tone of someone's voice or music that could be in the background or an environment of a setting. Those things are what builds psychological horror. Another convention that I would like to mention that is used in this film is the convention of cognitive estrangement. Cognitive estrangement is more likely known as a convention of science fiction, but it is also a convention of horror. Cognitive estrangement uses the genre of horror to rethink the real world problem that is proposed in this film and turns it into an act of marginalization that is physical and is able to be seen that causes fear and concern in others. The last convention I wanted to talk about in this film was the horror convention of therapy as entrapment. Instead of therapy being known as a method for people to heal themselves mentally, in this film it's posed as an unethical form of entrapment. This is accomplished by the demonstration of invasion of one's emotions and traumas in this film. In this film, therapy is weaponized and converted into a method of manipulation instead of a method of healing. Now that we've established these conventions of horror, now it's time to get into the discussion of the film. First, we're going to look at how Jordan Peele uses the convention of psychological horror to explore how in the post-racial era after Obama's presidency, folks with hateful and racial prejudices are not open about their beliefs. Instead, this community has learned to hide behind peaceful and liberal identities so as to not be ostracized and criticized by the rest of the true liberals of America. In the film, the father of the Armitage family attempts to ease the tensions of the racial difference between Chris and the Armitage family. Can you recall the scene where the father of the family shows Chris a picture of his father losing a race to a black man who defied the odds? The father of the Armitage family says this in a tone that implies admiration towards the black race.
Oh, you're gonna love this. My dad's claim to fame was beat by Jesse Owens in the qualifying round for the Berlin Olympics in 1936. Those are the ones where
Owens won in front of Hitler.
Yeah, what a moment! What a moment! I mean, Hitler's up there with all his perfect Aryan race bullshit. This black dude comes along, proves him wrong in front of the entire world. Amazing.
Tough break for your dad, though.
Yeah. He almost got over it.
Do you also remember the scene where the father tells Chris that he would have voted for Obama a third time?
By the way, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could. Best president in my lifetime, hands down.
I agree.
Yeah.
The Armitage family intends to level with Chris and help him become more comfortable with the family due to the racial difference, but instead, this actually just creates more tension and separation between them and makes Chris feel more isolated and uncomfortable. This creation of an unwelcoming and uneasy environment is an example of the use of the psychological horror convention. The Armitage family making these comments to Chris show how this family intends to hide their true intentions behind these comments of black admiration. This act of hiding true intentions acts as a deeper meaning that in the present world, people can hide their true racist and animist prejudices through fake identities as white liberals such as the Armitage family have done. These examples use horror indirectly by creating an uncomfortable environment for Chris, suggesting future harm towards Chris while being discreet instead of threatening Chris openly. Now getting into the horror convention of cognitive estrangement, the coagula procedure is a surgery that the Armitage family specializes in, where the family transplants the brain of a white individual into the body of a black individual to gain full control of his or her body for their own physical desires. The creation of this procedure serves as the use of the horror convention of cognitive estrangement because of how this estranges the concept of the belief of white superiority and slavery into a procedure that dehumanizes black people and turns them into slaves of the white people, losing full control of their body to the white individual for the purpose of the white individual's desire for the physical traits of black people.
What I want is deeper. I want your eye, man. I want those things you see through.
This is crazy.
This movie clip symbolizes how black people are viewed by white people for their special, distinct qualities that other people do not possess and for their heightened physical capabilities that others do not possess, instead of making an image out of someone for their non-physical traits that separate them from physical stereotypes. The coagular procedure is an example of how this movie uses a horror variant of cognitive estrangement to explore the theme of slavery and racism and how the horrific aspect of this family takes advantage of black people's bodies so that they can control their bodies to live in them and do whatever they want with them. Lastly, putting emphasis on the horror convention of unethical therapy and entrapment, this movie creates a completely unethical interpretation of therapy and hypnosis. In a therapy session, there needs to be a trustful relationship between the therapist and the patient, and the therapist needs to be mindful of not prying into the patient's boundaries. If you had a therapist, you would want to be able to trust them and feel comfortable with them. But in this film, the mother of the Armitage family crosses every boundary that a therapist is not supposed to. Instead of the usual and ethnic ideology of therapy and hypnosis, the movie shows the act of therapy and hypnosis as a tool that can be weaponized to use against black people in order to get advantage of them. The mother's use of hypnosis provides her with the ability to render Chris and the rest of her victims disabled. The mother of the Armitage family also betrays Chris by drawing out his deep traumas of his mother's death and the intense emotions that come with them, and then takes full control over his body, which is the opposite of what real therapy is supposed to look like.
You're so scared. You think it was your fault? How do you feel now?
I can't move.
You can't move.
Why can't I move?
You're paralyzed. Just like that day when you did nothing. You did nothing. Now, sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink.
In this clip, we see how the mother of the Armitage family takes advantage of Chris's traumas and makes him feel guilty about his mother's death, tricking him into thinking it was his fault, and then using that control to sink him into the ground. This wrongful act of hypnosis and false therapy shows how the Armitage family does not care for ethics or for the morale of human beings that do not reside with their Caucasian ethnicities, exposing their racist tendencies to view black people as objects to improve their physical experiences in life. All these choices of usage of horror conventions allow Jordan Peele to create an educational, scary, and very engaging film about the existing and subtle dangers of racism in our current world. This film exposes that while racism and prejudice beliefs and dangers have been reduced, these dangers have adapted to the modern world, learning to blend in with the ally. This concludes my podcast, and I would like to thank you very much for tuning in and listening to what my argument is and what I have to say on this topic.